Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is on the central conflict within intentional living and financial discipline, consumption control. The source material lays out some highly effective strategies for spending less, from mandatory waiting periods to completely, dismantling our digital consumption cues.
Indeed. And these strategies, they really illustrate the tension that's inherent in changing behavior. On one hand, we see practices aimed at strengthening the individual, building that mental stamina and self-control.
Right.
And then juxtaposed with that, you have methods that suggest the modern consumer environment is just so overwhelmingly powerful that true success requires, radical environmental engineering first.
That tension frames our core discussion today. When reducing consumption and achieving an intentional spending mindset, is long-term success primarily rooted in cultivating internal self-mastery and discipline, or is it in aggressively managing and neutralizing the external environment of, engineered consumer temptation? I'll be arguing that the development of internal virtues, patience, and a defined goal focus is the most foundational element. It's the engine that drives lasting change.
And I will take the opposing view. While internal discipline is, of course, the ideal, the nature of modern, hyper-personalized commerce is it's too sophisticated. So I'm going to contend that neutralizing the external environment, securing the digital and cultural battlefield, is the essential prerequisite. If you don't reduce the constant assault of engineered temptation, I think even the strongest internal resolve will eventually be eroded.
My core argument, though, is that external actions like cleaning out an inbox or deleting an app, they're merely outputs of a deeper internal alignment. The transformation really begins when we build fundamental virtues. Consider the 30-day waiting rule that the material recommends. Its purpose, as stated, isn't just to delay the purchase. It is explicitly designed to cultivate financial discipline and patience. This rule works because it introduces cognitive friction into the process, and it actively creates that emotional distance you need to overcome the psychological drive for instant gratification, or what, behavioral economists call temporal discounting. The practice fundamentally transforms an internal reflex into a reasoned response.
I appreciate the focus on cognitive friction. I do. But that friction is only effective if the incoming force is manageable. The material emphasizes that temptation is engineered. And this isn't just advertising, it's a personalized data profile designed to exploit your emotional triggers. So if you're constantly exposed to thousands of personalized cues every single day, you are asking a nascent internal discipline to fight a war on 100 fronts at once. How can self-mastery develop if the environment just resets the impulse loop every time you open your browser or scroll your social feed? The strength of that external engine, I think, makes neutralizing that environment the primary necessity.
But those tools of internal mental processing are still paramount. Take the implementation of the pros and cons list. This isn't just busy work, it's a cognitive audit. It forces a mindful, rational approach by translating that abstract desire for a new product into the concrete costs of mental load, maintenance, storage, and of course, financial opportunity cost. It's an exercise in self-awareness, showing that the core weakness isn't the external cue, but the internal emotional reflex that prioritizes some transient pleasure over a long-term rational assessment.
That mindful approach is fragile, though. It relies on the consumer having the mental bandwidth to even engage with it. And this is why the external measures, the deliberate strategy to unsubscribe from newsletters, clear your browsing history, reset the YouTube homepage, are so essential. These actions are active steps to disrupt the data feedback loop. By clearing your digital history and killing those personalized recommendations, you are preventing the algorithm from building a detailed profile of weakness that it can then exploit. This isn't a byproduct of discipline, it's a necessary preemptive strike that gives your rational mind the quiet space it needs to implement that pros and cons list effectively.
However, the ultimate success metric presented in the material is the internal shift in motivation, reframing saving itself as a source of excitement and pride by focusing on massive financial goals like independence or early retirement that transforms self-denial into empowerment and self-mastery. You're replacing the internal reward mechanism that's associated with buying with a far superior, sustained reward associated with achieving major life goals. This is the core success factor, the achievement of a transformed mindset where purchases become logical, intentional replacements rather than emotional responses.
I agree, the transformed mindset is the destination, but the path there is often blocked by cultural conditioning, which is entirely external. The material notes that in the US, spending has become a cultural hobby of consumerism, and it's replacing genuine community and meaningful engagement. We shop for entertainment, retail therapy replaces real self-care. To counter such a massive cultural force, you need an external, practical substitution, and this is where the material recommends cultivating low-cost hobbies, skating, reading, time outdoors. This isn't simply a nice thing to do once you've saved money. It is a necessary, proactive defensive measure to fill the cultural void that consumerism currently occupies.
Okay, let's zero in on the efficacy of those initial structural tools. I would maintain that the 30-day rule is sufficient to overcome the external push, provided that the internal commitment is present. By instituting that temporal firewall, you test whether the desire is a genuine need or just, marketing hype. If the vast majority of items lose their appeal after 4 weeks, doesn't that prove that rationality and patience, internal virtues, can successfully override the external short-term stimulus?
That's a powerful defense of the rule, but I have to challenge its longevity in the modern digital ecosystem. You can wait 30 days, sure, but if on day 31 your inbox has a "don't miss out" personalized sale email and your social feed has retargeted ads for the exact same item, the environment is actively working to reset the desire loop. How long can you ask someone to maintain that state of internal vigilance? Algorithmic conditioning is designed to be relentless. This is why I argue that preemptive environmental cleaning, the systemic removal of those digital cues, is the essential prerequisite. You have to clear the digital fog so the 30-day wait can actually serve its purpose without immediate interference.
So what you're saying is that without the preemptive digital purge, the 30-day rule is essentially ineffective?
Not ineffective, no, but severely hampered and unnecessarily exhausting. The external cleanup is a form of protecting your future self from your present, impulsively conditioned self.
I understand the pragmatic appeal of, securing the battlefield, but I still see the warfare as only necessary because the internal commitment to a larger goal isn't strong enough yet. Once financial independence becomes that true, visceral source of excitement and pride, the digital cues begin to lose their potency, not because they are gone, but because the internal reward system has completely superseded them. The digital environment is merely a highly visible symptom of a deeper internal pursuit of fulfillment, which brings us back to the role of hobbies.
I look at hobbies differently. I stress that consumerism functions as entertainment. People use online shopping or browsing high-end items to occupy mental space, similar to scrolling endlessly on social media. Finding engaging, low-cost hobbies, whether it's learning a skill or spending time in nature, is a critical external intervention. It's an active strategy to break the cultural dependency on consumerism as the default form of self-soothing or boredom relief. It is not just a happy byproduct, it's a required behavioral replacement.
That's an interesting finding, but I would argue that those sustainable, low-cost hobbies only become appealing once the internal priorities are actually set. Why would someone choose the long-term effort of learning guitar or the physical exertion of skating over the instant, effortless rush of clicking buy, unless they have already achieved that inner alignment and discipline you just mentioned? Focusing on financial independence provides a sustained and superior reward structure that allows the low-cost, high-engagement hobbies to flourish. The internal goal is paramount. The hobby is the logical output of that new alignment.
Let's look at the ultimate demonstration of intentional spending outlined in the material. The practical strategy of seeking used, borrowed, or lower-cost alternatives when something is genuinely needed. This pragmatic approach shows that successful minimalism relies on a systematic, external process of evaluation. It requires actively hunting for second-hand items or borrowing tools rather than simply denying the purchase. This systematic evaluation proves that success is rooted in the practical, step-by-step external execution of evaluating cost and source.
I'm not convinced that the execution proves the core mechanism.
That pragmatic behavior, the willingness to hunt for a used item, is simply the logical output of the internal system defined by the pros and cons list and the commitment to financial goals. The reason we buy new and conveniently is largely due to what we call the default bias, that tendency to stick with the easiest option. Without the underlying commitment to financial discipline and patience, the impulse to follow that path of least resistance, buying new from Amazon, persists. The internal foundation is what defeats the default bias and makes the external practical seeking of alternatives sustainable.
But without clearing the digital environment, that discipline is constantly being depleted. It's an issue of cognitive load. If you use your limited willpower every morning resisting the targeted ads for a specific gadget, you may be depleted by the afternoon when you need the resolve to spend an hour searching eBay for a used alternative. External management can serve that internal willpower for the moments it truly matters.
And strengthened. Otherwise, what happens when a new form of temptation emerges that you haven't yet learned how to block?
Well, this deep dive is your
As we
manual for
conclude,
self-reclamation.
I want to reiterate that the
really is.
true transformation described in the material lies in developing patience, self-control, and establishing those powerful long-term financial goals. This is the core work.
Right. And it's
It
important
fundamentally
to stress, this isn't about
changes
counting
one's
every single
relationship
item
to
you own or
desire
anything like
and
that.
ultimately
No, not at all.
achieves
It's
the
about
liberation
strategically
from the
gaining
illusion that
control,
happiness can be bought.
reclaiming your mental bandwidth,
External
and
actions
moving
are
beyond just
indispensable
passive
tools,
spending
yes,
toward,
but they serve
truly
the
intentional
internal discipline.
Indeed.
They don't create
Our
it.
sources have allowed us
Conversely,
to
I
distill this
must
entire
reaffirm
process down
that in the
into
modern
7
economy,
highly actionable
success demands
strategies.
aggressive
We're aiming
management
to,
of
well,
engineered
to flip the script
temptation,
entirely.
Flip the
both
script out.
digitally and
Well,
culturally,
instead of
to achieve
viewing
intentional
spending
detachment.
or restraint as
Internal
self-denial,
discipline is
which
profoundly
how
vulnerable
modern society
when the
often frames
battleground
it.
is hostile.
We are presenting
Success
it
requires
as a source
securing
of
the external
true
environment
empowerment.
first
I
through
see.
It's about
preemptive steps
self-mastery
like algorithmic
and
warfare
eventually
and
profound
actively
psychological
replacing
freedom.
high-cost
I like that.
cultural
Our
habits
mission
with
today is to
low-cost,
provide
genuine
you with the
engagement.
how-to guide
It's
for
clear that
breaking
the
out of that
strategies
cyclical
presented
consumer
in the
loop.
material, whether
We
they're
really
focused
need to
on
analyze
strengthening the
specific
internal core or
psychological,
mastering the
environmental,
external
and,
environment, are necessary and
financial
complementary
factors that
steps
keep
in the
us spending when
continuous
we
process of
don't really
aligning
need to.
what one truly
We
values
are
with how
preparing
one
you
lives.
for what our source
Absolutely.
material
The
very
listener must
accurately
ultimately
describes
weigh
as the
which element
warfare
serves
against
as
the
the most
modern
critical
economy of
starting
attention.
point.
And
The
trust
hard
me,
work of internal
understanding that
virtue
context is
or the
half
necessary
battle one.
practical
I love
work
that
of
framing.
securing the environment
Warfare
against a
the economy of
constant,
attention.
sophisticated
It instantly
challenge.
shifts the dynamic from, personal failure like I lack willpower to external manipulation.
Exactly.
The thinking becomes, the system is designed to defeat me. And once you recognize it as a war, you can actually start building a successful defense.
Exactly. And the most successful defense starts not on the battlefield itself, but at the border, creating immediate distance from the threat.
Okay.
If we can just introduce a small amount of friction, a rational filter, before that impulse takes over, well, we win the majority of skirmishes right there.
Okay, let's unpack this initial filter. This idea of protecting ourselves from immediate desire. I think we all know that feeling.
Oh, for sure.
You see an ad, you read a review, you walk past a perfect window display. It could be a new espresso machine, a pair of high-tech hiking boots, or even just a decorative piece for the living room. The chemical response is immediate. I must act now.
The urgency.
Exactly. The author challenges this urgency head-on with strategy 1.
Yes.
And strategy number 1 is the imposition of the 30-day waiting rule before making any significant purchase. And when we say significant, it's important to note, we mean anything that crosses a predetermined emotional threshold.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily just a high dollar amount. It's about anything that generates that, that emotional buzz of novelty.
The mechanism here is, it's a beautiful biological hack, really. It weaponizes time against our own emotional wiring. We have to remember that desire for novelty, that thrill of the new, is driven by the limbic system.
Okay, the ancient emotional part of our brain.
The ancient emotional part, right? When we see something shiny, the brain floods us with dopamine, and that urges immediate action.
Get it now.
Get it now. But the rational part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for long-term planning, cost analysis, and delayed gratification, it's physically slower to engage.
So it's literally lagging behind.
It's lagging behind. The 30-day rule acts as a mandatory timeout, allowing that rational processing center to finally catch up. The primary goal is just to allow for emotional distance.
Okay, I understand the theory of cooling off, but 30 days, that feels like an eternity in our culture.
It does.
If I see a great deal on a new piece of technology, isn't there a risk that I miss the opportunity? How does the source material address that fear of missing out, FOMO, which is what fuels so many of these impulse buys?
That is the core conflict, isn't it? Because the entire marketing infrastructure is built on manufactured scarcity and urgency.
Limited time offer, 2 days only.
Exactly. Flash sale.
Right.
All of it. Our source material argues that if a purchase is truly necessary, it will either still be available in 30 days or a comparable item will surface. The urgency is almost always an artificial trigger designed to bypass your prefrontal cortex.
So it's a litmus test for true need versus a manufactured desire.
Precisely. The waiting period serves as a practical test. If the desire remains strong after a full month and you can still articulate a rational use case, then okay, maybe it reflects a genuine necessity or a planned goal.
But I'm guessing that's not what usually happens.
Not at all. The author documents that in the vast majority of cases, the intense urgent need fades entirely by day 15 or 20. What motivated the impulse wasn't the utility of the item, but the temporary thrill of the chase and maybe the status associated with a new acquisition.
Can you give us a concrete example of how this plays out? Say
Yeah.
I'm eyeing a new high-end gaming monitor, something, I don't know, over $500.
Certainly. Let's take that gaming monitor. Day 1. You're doing intense research, you're watching all the reviews, imagining the enhanced clarity. It's a high dopamine rush.
Oh, yeah.
You put it in the digital shopping cart. Days 2 through 7. You're probably revisiting that cart multiple times. You're rationalizing the purchase based on some hypothetical future use. Oh, I'll be so much more productive, or my gaming will improve.
Right.
But by days 10 through 14, you might start to realize your current monitor is perfectly functional, or that $500 could be better used for a vacation, or just put into savings.
The initial emotional heat has died down.
It has. And crucially, the author ties this practice directly to building what he calls financial discipline and patience. Patience, as a skill, is constantly being degraded in a world that's optimized for one-click purchases and instant delivery. Forcing that 30-day gap is a radical act of building resilience. It is the repeated, deliberate action of denying a momentary impulse for a month that strengthens the discipline muscle.
So it's turning self-restraint into an actual habit. But what about the friction of managing that list? Do I just leave like 15 things sitting in my Amazon cart for a month? That seems like it's still tempting me.
That's a great point, and the source suggests a more formal tracking method, a physical note, or a simple digital spreadsheet, something specifically for items undergoing the 30-day review.
So you take it out of the store environment completely.
Completely. This externalization prevents the items from constantly cluttering your digital shopping carts, which just keeps the temptation in view.
Yeah.
By forcing yourself to write it down, you are already moving the item from the emotional impulse center to the rational planning center. This is key. The friction is the point. It's a deliberate psychological hurdle.
That makes a lot of sense. The act of writing it down acknowledges the desire, but then files it away for scheduled review rather than urgent action.
Yeah, I like that. And if the 30-day rule is the temporal filter, the next strategy is the rational filter. Strategy 2 is the deceptively simple exercise of creating a detailed pros and cons list before making a purchase,
Okay.
especially after the 30-day review period has passed.
Right. And most people do a pros list naturally. They think, this is convenient, it's fun, it solves this one problem I have.
Right.
But the source insists that the genuine value of this exercise lies in rigorously quantifying the cons.
Absolutely. The cons are systematically overlooked because we are so emotionally invested in the perceived benefits. The author instructs us to go beyond the obvious costs.
Which would be?
Well, yes, there's the immediate loss of money and the eventual physical clutter. But the truly transformative insights come from quantifying the hidden ongoing costs.
The hidden costs. Okay, break that down.
These hidden costs include things like ongoing maintenance requirements. Think about the specialized cleaning products for a certain fabric, or the subscriptions required for a smart device, or even the time spent updating software. But perhaps the most critical realization the source offers is what it calls the mental load of ownership.
Okay, let's talk about that, because that phrase, the mental load of ownership, that is a revelation. What exactly is that cognitive drag?
It's the invisible psychological weight that accompanies everything we own. It is the processing power your brain has to expend on managing the item. As soon as you acquire an object, your brain has to allocate resources to it.
Like what?
Things like, where do I put this? Does it need insurance? When do I clean it? How will I organize it with my other things? What if it breaks? How do I dispose of it responsibly when I'm done with it? Think about the hypothetical scenario of buying a specialized kitchen gadget, like a spiralizer.
Okay, got it.
The pros are obvious: fun, healthy meals. The immediate cost is maybe $40. But the hidden mental load includes finding cupboard space for it, remembering where you put the specialized cleaning brush.
Oh, I hate those little brushes.
Right, and then having to pull out 3 other gadgets just to reach it, feeling guilty when you haven't used it in 6 months.
Been there.
And eventually, the labor of listing it on a secondhand site or taking it to the dump, that cognitive drain accumulates for every single item you bring into your life.
I can definitely relate to that feeling of item guilt. When I look at a shelf full of things I swore I would use every day, and now they just collect dust, that guilt is part of the mental load.
Precisely. And the source emphasizes that for unneeded or aspirational items, the combination of money, clutter, maintenance, and that mental load often nearly always outweigh the initial fleeting convenience or pleasure. It forces a moment of self-imposed cognitive dissonance where you must confront the item's true life cycle cost.
So the power of this approach then,
Yeah.
it really goes way beyond just, shopping.
Far beyond.
Right. The author advocates for this framework as a template for all major life decisions.
Yes. And that's how this moves into a philosophy of intentional living. When you're considering a job change, a move, or a new relationship, we usually only list the pros.
Sure. More money, better commute, new excitement.
Exactly. Applying the cons list forces us to identify the hidden mental load, the political stress of the new office, the complexity of moving logistics, the emotional demands of a new commitment. It promotes a mindful approach rooted in self-control, ensuring your decisions are grounded in your values, long-term well-being, not just short-term perceived gains.
So if the 30-day rule is the impulse defense, the pros and cons list is the rationality test. It determines the item's long-term worth against its total cost of ownership, both financial and psychological.
That's a perfect summary.
So we've established the internal defenses. Now we turn to the external battlefield.
And this transition is crucial because it moves the responsibility away from solely being on individual willpower. We are operating in a hostile environment, and we have to recognize that the pressure to consume is not accidental. It is a designed system.
Right. This brings us to the central, unavoidable reality of our modern life, which is that temptation is engineered. We are not simply passing billboards anymore. We are subject to personalized, predictive, and relentless advertising.
Relentless is the word.
The algorithms, the marketing emails, the curated social media feeds, they exploit our vulnerabilities, our moments of boredom, curiosity, or insecurity to induce spending.
And the sophistication of this system cannot be overstated. These algorithms track minute changes in our behavior. How long we pause on an image, what we search for when we're feeling tired, even our location data.
They know us better than we know ourselves.
In some ways, yes. They learn our emotional triggers better than we know them ourselves, creating this feedback loop that's engineered solely for maximum consumption velocity.
So what does the author recommend for engaging in this practical warfare? This can feel so overwhelming, like you're fighting a digital hydra.
It can. The defense must be deliberate and surgical. It involves specific, actionable strategies to weaken consumer influence at its source. It's about taking the power of suggestion away from the artificial intelligence and putting it back into human hands.
Okay, let's run through the action list, because they're so practical. First, unsubscribing from newsletters. That's a direct cutoff point. It eliminates the daily, personalized solicitation that so often relies on creating that artificial urgency, a last-chance discount that forces immediate decision-making.
Correct. Your inbox is a primary delivery mechanism for temptation. Clearing that is cognitive hygiene 101. The second step is clearing your browsing history and cookies frequently.
And this is about disrupting the retargeting chain.
Precisely. If you look at one pair of shoes online, those shoes will follow you across every single website you visit for the next week, keeping that impulse alive. Clearing the history breaks the tracking mechanism that feeds those relentless personalized ads.
That seems like such a minor thing, but I realize now those retargeted ads are what keep the desire burning long past the initial impulse. They work against the 30-day window.
Absolutely. They prevent the cooling off period from working effectively. And the third detail, which I find most revolutionary, is resetting the YouTube homepage or similar social media landing pages.
Why is the YouTube or Instagram feed reset so crucial?
Well, think of what happens. You search for how to fix your dishwasher, a totally innocent, necessary search.
Okay.
The algorithm immediately concludes you are interested in home improvement. It then feeds you 3 videos on 10 must-have tools, 5 videos on amazing garage organization systems, and a new video review for a $600 power tool.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Within minutes, the necessary search for a simple repair transforms into a cascade of manufactured desire for things you never knew existed.
That is dangerously effective.
Resetting that homepage or rigorously telling Instagram not interested in all shopping-related posts means the next time you log in out of boredom, you are greeted with a blank slate or posts from friends, not a personalized sales floor.
Okay, but I need to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Please do.
If I clear my history and unsubscribe from everything, won't I miss out on genuine deals or legitimate information about products I do actually need to replace? Where is the line between aggressive defense and, self-sabotage?
That is a fair question, and the source makes a very clear distinction. This is about stopping passive consumption feeding, not active research.
Okay, what's the difference?
If you genuinely need a new winter coat, you will perform an intentional, active search for best durable winter coat reviews or ethical coat brands. That is a targeted, controlled action based on a genuine need.
Right.
What you are eliminating is the serendipitous discovery of products you didn't know you needed, which is the algorithm's main weapon. The goal of this practical warfare is intentional detachment. You are controlling your environment so your decisions are made from a vacuum of need, not a deluge of external suggestion.
That's a great distinction. You're trading a small convenience of potentially seeing a deal for the immense cognitive benefit of just reducing that constant advertising pressure.
And you're conserving your willpower for the moments that truly matter.
Right. Okay, so we've addressed the external environment. Now let's tackle the internal motivation for spending. This is where the psychological analysis in our source material becomes truly profound. Strategy 4 focuses on the insight that spending often replaces meaningful engagement.
This really addresses the root void. Why does someone who has a perfectly functional phone buy the new one? Why does someone buy a sweater they don't need? The author observes that the true trigger for many of these impulse buys isn't a lack of items, but a lack of purpose, creativity, or stimulation in the moment.
Boredom.
Boredom is the consumption algorithm's best friend. When we feel bored or tired or lacking in direction, the mind seeks stimulation, and shopping provides a quick, temporary rush of dopamine hit that mimics genuine joy or productivity.
It does feel productive in the moment.
It does. You get the thrill of the hunt, the feeling of making a productive decision, and the anticipation of arrival. But it's a sugar high. It's incredibly fleeting, which is why the purchase so often leads to emptiness or buyer's remorse shortly after.
So the counter strategy isn't just about avoiding spending, it's about actively substituting that stimulation with something that's genuinely rewarding.
Precisely. The goal is to cultivate genuine, low-cost passions that satisfy your curiosity, your creativity, and your need for play without the financial strain. The source cites activities like learning to skate, or deep reading, or coding, or engaging in community volunteering. These activities provide sustained nutrition for the soul rather than a fleeting rush.
That makes a lot of sense. If I spend 2 hours mastering a complex classical guitar piece or hiking a challenging trail, I gain a sense of lasting accomplishment and skill mastery. That satisfaction doesn't fade the way the thrill of unwrapping a new gadget does.
That is the crucial difference between stimulation and satisfaction. Genuine engagement leads to skill acquisition, deeper knowledge, and long-term purpose things that are intrinsically valuable and cannot be purchased.
Yeah.
The desire to just scroll through retail sites evaporates when your mental energy is focused on building something, or learning something, or experiencing the natural world.
This brings us to the author's really powerful socio-cultural observation. They claim that in many Western societies, particularly the United States, spending itself has become institutionalized. It's become a cultural hobby of consumerism.
It's an insidious cultural framework when you really think about it. Think about the entire infrastructure dedicated to shopping as a leisure activity. The multi-story malls, dedicated retail holidays like Black Friday, the cultural narrative around retail therapy.
Yeah.
If a friend says, "What are you doing this weekend?" and you say, "I'm going to the mall," that is a perfectly socially acceptable answer for a leisure activity.
It's a default pastime.
It's a default. And this dependency makes consumption central to social connection and relaxation. The only way to break that dependency is to consciously substitute it. You have to replace the cultural hobby of consuming with the authentic hobby of creating or experiencing. It shifts your internal identity from consumer, someone who just accepts what is given to a creator, someone who generates value or skill from within. And that is a foundational psychological shift.
It completely flips the script on how you use your free time.
Yeah.
If your downtime activity is passively scrolling through products, you are being fed consumption. If your downtime activity is painting or learning Mandarin, your environment is feeding you personal growth and skill acquisition.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the defenses, the time delay, the rationality check, and the psychological warfare. Now, let's transition to the inevitable, the moment when you actually do need something.
Right.
This section moves from avoidance to intentional strategic action and reframing the concept of saving entirely.
And this is where we clarify a really common misconception. Minimalism, as it's presented in these sources, is emphatically not about total deprivation or living in a state of austerity.
Right.
It is defined as intentional spending. It's about meeting genuine needs in the most mindful, resource-efficient way possible, aligning every dollar you spend with your core values.
So when a genuine need arises, a refrigerator breaks, a child outgrows their shoes, or a specific tool is required for a project, the default mindset shifts immediately to a clear hierarchy of acquisition. What does that hierarchy look like?
The hierarchy is simple, yet it's often ignored in our rush to convenience. Step 1. Can I repair or utilize what I already have? Step 2. Can I borrow or share this item? Step 3. Can I acquire it used or refurbished? And step 4. Buy new, but only as a last resort and with high scrutiny.
Right.
The author provides highly specific examples. Instead of buying the latest model electronics, seek high-quality secondhand or refurbished items. Instead of owning a specialized tool like a paint sprayer or a large ladder that you might use once every 5 years, borrow from a neighbor or utilize a local tool library. And critically, maximize the use of libraries for media rather than purchasing every book or movie.
I often hear people say, but it's just easier to buy it new and know I'm getting exactly what I want with a warranty. How does the source address that perceived barrier of convenience?
It addresses it by highlighting 2 key benefits that outweigh the convenience. The first one is obvious: financial conservation.
Sure.
But the second, and more subtle benefit, is that this entire process of seeking alternatives actually deepens your appreciation for the items one already possesses.
Explain that appreciation effect. How does seeking out a used book or borrowing a tool make me appreciate it more?
Well, when consumption is merely an emotional reflex, 1 click, 2-day shipping, the item often arrives and is immediately taken for granted. The ease of acquisition diminishes its perceived value. But when you engage in the effort of searching, comparing used items, driving to pick up a borrowed item, or waiting for a library hold, you have invested effort and time into the acquisition process.
So there's sweat equity in it.
There's sweat equity in it. That effort makes the item carry a higher perceived value. You treat the borrowed ladder with more care because you had to ask for it and return it promptly. You cherish the secondhand book more because you hunted for it. It fundamentally turns consumption into a conscious act rather than an emotional reflex. You are solving a practical problem, not fulfilling a convenient fantasy.
And it also forces you to confront the stigma around using secondhand goods. In a culture that values newness as a proxy for status, intentionally seeking out used options is a quiet rejection of that social pressure.
Absolutely. The author notes that separating status from utility is a major step toward independence. When your worth isn't tied to the newness of your possessions, you gain profound freedom. You are judging items based on their function, durability, and cost-effectiveness, rather than their ability to signal wealth or trend adherence.
This brings us to the next strategy, which is the critical cognitive shift. We are culturally conditioned to associate excitement with spending. The Black Friday cues, the product reveals, it's all designed to thrill. Strategy 6 asks us to deliberately reframe the act of saving and investing as the primary sustained source of excitement and pride.
And this is arguably the most challenging element of the entire system because it involves rewiring decades of cultural programming. The foundational mental anchor the author uses is this: the cost of delay.
The cost of delay.
Every unneeded purchase is framed as delaying a larger, more impactful ambition. That $30 impulse buy is not just $30 gone, it's delaying debt freedom by a week, delaying a down payment contribution by a month, or delaying the point at which you can confidently say no to a bad job opportunity.
Right.
It shifts the focus from the momentary deprivation of not buying to the exciting acceleration of a long-term goal.
Okay, I get the theory.
Yeah.
But how do we make abstract financial progress, watching a spreadsheet balance increase, feel as viscerally thrilling as the physical experience of unboxing a new gadget. That's a huge hurdle for our brains, which are optimized for immediate rewards.
That's where the intentional emotional shift comes in.
Yeah.
The source advises actively gamifying and visualizing your savings. For example, use apps or physical charts to map your progress toward a tangible goal. If the goal is paying off a credit card, the moment you avoid an impulse purchase, you immediately transfer that money to the card and watch the number shrink.
Ah, so you get an immediate feedback loop.
You get an immediate, measurable bit of progress. That merriment transforms self-denial into empowerment and self-mastery. Each avoided expense becomes concrete progress toward financial independence. The thrill comes not from acquiring an object, but from acquiring optionality, the ability to choose your time, your work, and your location.
So the feeling of deprivation when you pass up that gadget is intentionally replaced with a burst of pride and excitement because you just got measurably closer to retirement or debt freedom or that long-anticipated trip.
Exactly. The source suggests assigning a high, immediate emotional value to debt reduction. Debt, in this context, is viewed as consumption from your future self. Saving is giving your future self freedom.
I like that.
When you reframe saving as buying future freedom, it becomes inherently more exciting than buying a toaster today. This creates a sustained positive feedback loop. When you see your investment portfolio accelerating or your debt balance plummeting, that sustained feeling of competence and control far outweighs the temporary rush of acquisition. Financial independence stops being a vague concept and becomes the ultimate high-value consumer good you are actively working to acquire.
That reframing is such a powerful tool for self-coaching. Instead of focusing on, I can't buy this, you're focusing on, I am choosing independence over this temporary object.
Precisely. And so we've implemented the defenses, we've adopted the rational filters, engaged in digital warfare, filled the internal voids, and reframed our financial goals. Now we arrive at strategy 7, which is really the synthesis of all these practices, the ultimate payoff of this intentional approach.
Right, and the core transformation is not just a change in budgeting. It's a profound alteration of one's entire relationship to desire itself. The author notes that after consistent practice of the first 6 strategies, the constant, incessant craving for novelty, that internal engine driving consumption, it simply burns out and dissipates.
It does.
And this is the peace of mind that I think everyone is truly searching for. It means that frantic, distracting internal voice whispering, you need this, you should look at that, it quiets down because the external cues have been removed and the internal voids have been filled by genuine, meaningful engagement.
Right. You stop seeking external validation through purchases.
Mm-hmm.
Psychologically, this is what the author is achieving. You're stepping off the hedonic treadmill.
Can you explain that concept for our listeners?
The hedonic treadmill describes the tendency of humans to quickly return to a baseline level of happiness despite major positive or negative events. In consumption, you buy a new car, you get a rush, but within weeks, that car is just a car, and you start craving the next upgrade to maintain that initial spike of happiness.
You're just running in place.
You're running in place, chasing a high you can't sustain. Consistent minimalism breaks that cycle. By refusing to chase the temporary novelty rush, you allow your baseline happiness to be rooted in stable internal factors, your relationships, your skill mastery, your health, and your financial security.
Things that are immune to market volatility.
Exactly. And this transformed mindset is reflected directly in your purchasing behavior. Purchases cease to be emotional fulfillment acts. They transition to being strictly intentional replacements only when something breaks or wears out.
So if my shoes wear out, I buy shoes after careful research, adhering to that hierarchy of acquisition we talked about. I'm not buying shoes because a new style dropped or because I feel inadequate. I'm simply maintaining functionality. That clarity is the definition of true functionality over emotional fulfillment.
That distinction is the hallmark of success. The new relationship with possessions is purely utilitarian. You are no longer shopping to feel something or to define yourself. You are acquiring only to do something essential or necessary. The item serves your life goals. You do not serve the item. And the author offers a final, powerful definition that synthesizes the entire philosophy. Minimalism is not deprivation, but liberation from the illusion that happiness can be bought.
That sentence is really the culmination of the entire journey. We have been conditioned since childhood to believe that satisfaction lies just beyond the next purchase. Liberation is consciously stepping off that treadmill and realizing that contentment is an internal state available through alignment.
The alignment of your values with your actions and your spending habits.
Exactly.
So let's just connect the strategies back to the listener one more time. The 30-day rule and the pros and cons list establish internal discipline and rational friction.
Right.
Unsubscribing and cultivating hobbies addresses the environmental and psychological manipulation by external forces. And intentional spending and reframing savings provide the active roadmap for channeling resources toward long-term independence.
Yeah.
When you combine all 7 of these strategies, you move from passively reacting to the external system to proactively designing a life that rigorously aligns with your values. That systematic approach is the pathway to profound psychological freedom and self-mastery our sources reveal.
This deep dive has laid out a really comprehensive framework. We've shown that regaining control over modern consumption isn't about living in forced austerity, but about adopting deliberate, strategic behavior to win the warfare against the economy of attention. We've covered the 7 practical steps provided by our source material, giving you the complete blueprint.
And let's quickly review the most memorable and actionable concepts. We introduced the necessary friction of the 30-day filter to allow the rational brain to engage. We analyzed the heavy, invisible tax levied by the mental load of ownership in every single decision we make.
We stress the need for practical warfare against engineered temptation, actively resetting the digital environment that constantly suggests what we should desire. And we highlighted the critical psychological realization that spending often replaces meaningful engagement, serving as a temporary substitute for genuine joy.
Finally, we covered the path to true financial empowerment, replacing the momentary, fleeting thrill of buying with the sustained excitement and pride of saving, investing, and moving toward measurable financial independence.
We know this is a lot of information, but the power really lies in implementation. You don't need to adopt all 7 strategies immediately. Pick one. Maybe start today by ruthlessly unsubscribing from every marketing email in your inbox, or start your first 30-day waiting list for any item over $100.
So we'll leave you with this final thought for the week. We discussed how consumption has become a cultural hobby. We challenge you to identify what specific cultural hobby. Is it scrolling? Is it driving to big box stores? Is it researching products online? What hobby you might be replacing with spending this week?
And more importantly, what authentic, low-cost passion, something that engages your creativity, your curiosity, or your physical body, could you actively substitute in its place this week? Pay attention to that moment of boredom when the urge to consume arises. Observe how often you instinctively reach for that temporary rush versus a meaningful engagement. That observation alone is the most profound step toward liberation. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.